What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Steve Schlintz, and I want to welcome you back to another episode of Dental Practice Freedom Radio. And today we're going to talk about software, but how what I've been currently doing with a personal software budgeting app has reinforced this idea that I hold so near and dear to me, which is this difference between getting into something and really mastering something, and how you actually go through that process. And this is important in dentistry because, believe me, there's a difference between doing a filling and mastering a filling, doing a crown prep and mastering a crown prep. And, I think what we're going to talk about today is very similar to, if you guys ever watch any cooking shows, Gordon Ramsay. And whether you love him, hate him, you can take any master chef, any top chef, right? And watch what they do. And it's always, there'll be episodes where they let Gordon actually cook. And I always notice this one thing about the chefs that are competing. Let's look at MasterChef. The chefs that are competing that are amateurs, even though they make really good dishes and their flavor profiles are amazing and they get nothing but rave reviews, watching them cook and then watching Gordon cook, you almost see two totally different things. They look like, it doesn't even look like cooking when you compare them from one to the other. They look completely different. And if you've ever watched this and you ever studied it, what you realize is Gordon also started like those amateur chefs. But what happened is over time, he mastered details to the point that he became one with the cooking. It became so effortless. Another example is if you watch professional golfers, and I think we can all relate to this if we've golfed at all. If you watch an amateur golf, usually it's a struggle. They're going through the movements, they're playing the game of golf, but everything looks there's so much effort that's involved. Versus if you watch a professional, when they swing, if you go and watch them live, it looks effortless. And I've been fascinated by that idea for so long. What makes somebody make something look so effortless, do it so effortlessly? Man, I can't talk today. Sorry. I guess I haven't had enough coffee. I don't know. It's relatively early in the morning, but it's not that early in the morning. So what makes those people do something with so little effort or so much perceived little effort compared to someone else? And I do believe that it's this idea of hammering basics over and over and over again, which ultimately actually leads to new levels of understanding so you can come back and basically reinvent those basics. You might be asking, where are you going with this, Steve? I feel the same process pertains in everything that we excel at. And if you're in your practice and you're starting this new comprehensive, holistic-based practice, I was on a Q&A with my clients last night. So when you start doing a new patient process that's totally different than what you're used to, and you're doing an interview, and you're doing a guided tour, and you're doing a review, and you really want to start to connect to this, you're going to find that the first 20, 30, 40 that you do are really not that good. And you're going to be like that amateur chef that you might get the dish done, you might present the treatment, but there's chaos and like pans are moving and flying all over the place and you can't find the salt and you're like, where did I put that? That's like your first 20 or 30 or 40 new patient interviews. But as you continue and you keep studying and you keep studying and you keep studying, what's going to happen is things that you've read before or you've implemented before, you have a new level of understanding so you can go back and you go, oh, that's what they meant by that. I never even paid attention to that the first 30 times because I was so focused on this step. There's power in that, right? And if you look at, your practice and you start to study the same things over and over, and if you've listened to my previous podcast episodes, you know that there's certain books that I've read 30, 40 times. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I read that book 9 times in a month. I read the book every 3 days for an entire month. And I'm going to go back now and read that book over and over and over again. One of my mentors, Bob Proctor, he has read a section of that book every day since 1965. He's still reading it. He's now, I think he's 85. That's incredible. But what happens is, he said, every time, I remember this quote, and he quoted somebody else. He said, when you read a good book the second time, you don't see something in it that wasn't there before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before, something like that. So when you read a good book the second time, you're not seeing something on the pages that wasn't there before. You're seeing something in yourself that wasn't there before. It's a new level of awareness and understanding, and that is so powerful. And so you might be asking yourself, well, what does that have to do with this budgeting software that you have? Well, you have to get some context. I've been playing around with different financial tracking devices now for a few years, and I've really never found anything that I liked. I will tell you, I can't stand QuickBooks. I think it's like the worst software ever. It's kind of like similar to a lot of dental softwares out there on the market, and I have one of those. Patterson's EagleSoft. It's a love-hate relationship. I couldn't run my practice right now without it. But it's full of things that I don't need. It's not intuitive. You have to click on a little wizard icon to get a prescription. It just doesn't make any sense. It was designed in the 90s and it's never changed. And so, and I know they've worked on it and updated, and I'm not bashing EagleSoft. I think it's one of the better ones on the market. So I'm not saying that. It's not an intuitive thing for me. As a Mac user, not a very intuitive thing. The software budget and using QuickBooks, I've never been able to grasp those concepts. So I've never studied something long enough to master it. I know some people love QuickBooks. They live by their QuickBooks reports. I just never have been able to do that. So I've been looking for these software apps, both for my practice and also for my personal life. And I want to go back to one that I keep going back to over and over again. And it's You Need a Budget, YNAB. It is a software that takes some getting used to. And this is why I'm bringing this up, because it hammers home my point. When I first started with it 3 or 4 years ago, I would start, I'd stop. And then I'd start and I'd stop. And I never really got into it enough to actually be able to implement basics on a consistent routine. I ran it for about 8 months. That was probably the longest that I ran it. And that was about 4 years ago. But when I went to go give it to my accountant, it was confusing because I was using one thing and they were using QuickBooks and nothing was working. And so I kind of gave up on it. And I went back though and I said, okay, you guys keep doing your QuickBook thing. I'll give you everything you need. You can run your separate reports. I'll pay you. I don't care. But I'm going to try something different on my own personal finances because it's going to help me track my spending both in and out of my practice. So I started using YNAB again. And over the time, they actually changed the software. So it's a lot better of a software now. It's a lot more robust, but there's some nuances to it. And so I started working with the software and I got a coach. And I found this coach through YouTube, and a younger guy, amazing. And I told him, I said, hey, listen, I want to work on this for myself, my practice, my coaching practice. And then also I want to be able to create a system that's duplicatable because I know this is something that can help other dentists because we're all struggling with this. And, we get these reports and all these accountants that nothing ever makes sense. So we've been working on this now for a good couple months. And he's really been challenging me to get into the software. And so as I'm getting into the software, what's interesting is the same principle of reading a book over and over and over again is what I'm doing with the software. And I'm trying to master this software. What does this mean? Why would I do this? Why would I do this? And it's helping me understand my behavioral aspects to money and how I look at money. Now, if you were to tell me when I first started that software 4 years ago, that if I kept working with it and working with it and working with it and understanding the theory behind the software, that I'd have a much better understanding of all of money, I'd say you're nuts. But it's because I'm repeating this over and over and over again that you start to realize the software is an extension of a philosophy. Right? The software is an extension of the philosophy. For this philosophy, it's Jesse Meekum. He developed the software. He used an Excel spreadsheet before, but it's a philosophy. There's 4 basic rules to YNAB, and you follow the philosophy through the software. And I started to think about that. It was only through the repetition of information that I understood that the software is really an extension of the philosophy. So everything in the software reflects the philosophy. And I started to think about these two concepts, this law of repetition and mastery, and why most people get confused in their new patient process. The new patient process is like your software that fits the philosophy. So you have to identify your philosophy first, and then you implement the software, which is the new patient process that fits the philosophy. So if I gave you a new patient process, but you didn't identify your philosophy first, A, it wouldn't make any sense. And B, you wouldn't be able to implement it effectively because you haven't linked the philosophy to the process yet. Now, what's really cool, and I've seen this with clients, is if you take that analogy, right? YNAB is an extension of the software is an extension of the philosophy, and your new patient process is an extension of your philosophy. When you start to play with the software, you learn more about the theory. And then when you learn more about the theory, it affects the software. So as you continue to learn and master this new patient process, this comprehensive based process, when you learn more from outside information, mentors, coaches, reading, yourself, right? I do a lot of personal growth and development. It's taught me more about dental practices than anything else. And when I start to learn more about myself, it changes my philosophy on things, which changes my new patient process. And as I learn more about my new patient process, it reinforces or forces me to analyze my philosophy again. So it's this reciprocal thing. If you remember a previous podcast episode I did, I talked about confidence and competence. So the competence leads to more confidence, and increased confidence leads to more competence. It's the same thing here. The new patient process, let's talk about the new patient process as a philosophy of comprehensive care. The more you learn about comprehensive care and understand the relationship of, relationship-based dentistry, it's going to affect your new patient process in a positive way. And as your new patient process in a positive way leads to more competence in what you do, it's going to reinforce the theory, and you'll start to get this thing moving, and it's incredible. And so as you start to study things, I want you to be thinking about YNAB, what you've learned today in the podcast. Like the YNAB is an extension of the philosophy, the software, but the software itself is an extension of the philosophy. Your new patient process is an extension of the philosophy. And if you get in it and work on it and work on it and work on it, you'll start to have a new understanding, which ultimately leads to more joy and more satisfaction in your practice. So I know there was a lot of theory that I threw at you today and a lot of conceptual stuff. I encourage you to listen to this podcast about 2 or 3 times, because honestly, if you can understand this, it gives you the motivation to continue to move when things don't quite go your way. Because the more you study something, the greater the level of understanding, which means it's more fun, which means you'll get more reward out of it, which means ultimately your practice and your personal life will start to develop as a result. So hopefully you guys got value out of this. As always, leave a review or rating. I really appreciate that. It helps me get to more viewers and get my message across. If you are ready to take action in your practice in 2020, you said, I've had enough. I want to build one of these relationship-based practices that you talk about, Steve. I'm ready to take that plunge and effort. Then I encourage you to go to this bio. There's a link that takes you directly to my coaching page. You can set up a free coaching session with me. And what we'll do is we'll basically break down your practice, where you're at, where you want to go. And if I can help you, then I'll be able to extend an offer at that point. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next episode.